Hey, I'm back. I do apologize for being gone for a while, but unfortunately my daytime employer, my day job, required my attention for more than 12 hours a day. And that inhibits making any videos whatsoever. So I do apologize for my absence, but I'm back now, so let's get back to work. Today's video is about one thing that's going to make your rifle group smaller, and that is the critical connection between your scope and your barrel. So you're probably saying to yourself, but Keith, the scope is not mounted to the barrel, except on those weird-looking scout rifles. So what are you talking about? I'm talking about maintaining the alignment between the barrel and the scope. Remember, when you fire a rifle, everything moves, including the joint between the barrel and the action, and all of the components from the action all the way to the scope. If they don't come to rest at exactly the same place each and every shot after shot, your groups are going to open up. And that's what I wanted to show you today. Let's go sit back down at the bench and we can talk about it. Okay, enough of that. Let's talk about how we're going to achieve this. We have to keep that alignment perfect. The rifle I showed, that 700 Remington, was the reason I'm making this video. I was having some trouble with it. It wasn't shooting poorly, but it was not shooting the way I expected it to. I guess I should just tell you the story. I was doing load development with the 77 grain tipped Match King from Sierra. This bullet is not that hard to get to shoot, but I was having a hard time. I was getting some 3s, a few 4s, and a bunch of 5s and 6s out of the rifle at 100 yards. That's not good performance in my mind, because for a custom barrel, it should be shooting a lot better than that. So it's time to do some troubleshooting. Well, the first thing I decided to do was check that connection between the barrel and the action, because that is critical. It's a known item. I have done this experiment before with my 284 F-Open rifle. In that rifle, I found that going from that 60 to 75 foot-pounds that most people use to the 125 foot-pounds that people like Hellblaze use improved the stability of the precision of the rifle. In other words, it repeated better and more consistently the small groups that I was getting. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, why? Well, that's pretty simple. Under the pressure of firing, there's a lot of forces on the barrel steel itself. And sometimes that chicken groove at the front end of the threads can stretch more than what you would want it to. In other words, you have to build up enough force in that joint to make sure it doesn't stretch to the point where the barrel can realign itself with the threads from shot to shot. So make sure that you have that barrel on at the right torque. While I was there, I noticed this about the action to scope rail connection. The scope rail was moving on top of the action from shot to shot. You can see it in the scuff pattern around the periphery of the scope rail mount. Well, this isn't going to be good for precision, because if it can move enough to scuff the finish, it can move enough to find a different place from shot to shot to shot. And add to that the fact that the little bit of good shooting I had showing up right here on the chart wasn't where it should have been. I mean, everybody and their brother has done load development with this 77 grain TMK and a 26-inch bolt action rifle and found it a little higher velocity, a little more powder charge. And I thought, this just doesn't make sense. Well, I now know why. So let's talk about fixing it, and then I'll show you what it did to the grouping of this particular rifle. The simple truth is you have to find a way for that scope rail to find its home in exactly the same place from shot to shot. And that means matching the external surface of the action perfectly. If it fits perfect, it isn't going to get out of alignment and stay out of alignment. That means bedding the scope rail to the action. Now, in this case, this action already had the finish scuffed off, and, well, I'm not fond of debonding agents, so I thought, what the heck, let's just glue it on. I just glued the scope rail on with Marine Tex Gray. Now, remember, this rifle has a bedded action already, so there's no stress on that end. We're just making sure that this scope rail is not imparting any stress either. So we're going to do it just like a stress-free bedding for a stock. In this case, the front fit pretty well, but the back had a little gap in it. So I just screw down the front, squeeze out all of the glue, clean it up, and then give that rear just a little squeeze with the hands and let it set with the screws loose in the back. After everything had set up overnight, I tighten the screws and call it good. The scope rail is literally bonded to the top of the action. Now, do I recommend this for your rifle? No, absolutely not. The only reason I did it this way was because the finish was already damaged on top of the action. If it wasn't damaged, I would have definitely put debonding agent in it, and it wouldn't have made any difference in the outcome. I've done this many times on different rifles. If content like this brings you value, would you do me a favor and like and subscribe? It helps the channel out and helps me to know what kind of content is valuable to you so I can make the kind of content that you need. At the same time, if you want to help monetarily, go on over to our page on Patreon. The link's in the description. Because keeping the lights on for an operation like this is not cheap. And otherwise, I'm going to be stuck with having to do commercials for male grooming products. And neither you nor I want that. So what did it do to the way the rifle shot? Well, I shot the exact same test over again. Identical situation to what I had before. And this is what the graph looks like now. You notice that the best accuracy happens a little higher up the charge range, up into that velocity range where you would normally find it for a 77 TMK in a 223 Remington. And look at these numbers. 2 in a row ones, followed by 3 twos. This is a node. This is a wide, happy, capable node. The barrel and the scope have to point at the same place relative to each other from shot to shot, or you're not going to get the small groups that you want. And even though all of the fasteners are torqued fully tight, you can still get some movement that can cause the groups to open up. So make sure that everything fits perfectly between the scope and the barrel so that you don't get a relative change in position from shot to shot. All right, guys, that's all there is to this one. You just have to make sure that your rifle is right because it may not be you. And it may not be your ammunition. It could be as simple as a mechanical problem with your rifle. And solving those first is the best way to make your load development work out. Anytime you get fishy results or a very finicky rifle, make sure you're checking things like the firing pin spring and ignition system and the scope mounting, because they do make a difference. Until next time, shoot straight, make sure your rifle's right before you start messing with your ammunition, because it might just be the rifle. And I'll see you in the next video.